President Zelensky has shown once again, and beyond any doubt, that Ukraine is the party of peace. Vladimir has committed to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the Russian President Vladimir Putin's response to the American proposed ceasefire just not good enough. Now, Keir Starmer was in fact addressing the media after hosting a virtual summit.
Putin will have to come to the table. So this is the moment. Let the guns fall silent. Let the barbaric attacks on Ukraine once and for all stop. And agree to a ceasefire now.
What if I told you that Starmer's ultimatum to Putin today could determine whether we're heading toward peace or global conflict? While media headlines focus on diplomatic posturing, the real power play is happening behind closed doors. Between Trump's good vibes from Russia and Starmer's promise to strain every sinew to pressure Putin, there's a dangerous gap forming in Western strategy. I've analyzed the coalition's leverage points and what they mean for Ukraine's future, and the implications are far more serious than most realize. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. What if Putin's rejection of Trump's ceasefire deal isn't mere stubbornness, but a calculated chess move designed to fracture Western unity?
Divisions between Ukraine and the US only serve Vladimir Putin. President Zelensky is right to try and rebuild his relationship with President Trump. He is keeping a cool head under very difficult circumstances.
Well, she's absolutely right that we need to do everything we can to ensure that the US, Europe and Ukraine are working together on lasting peace.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for that answer. All of us in this House know that the British Armed Forces are a huge source of pride to our country. They put themselves in harm's way to defend our values.
When we examine Putin's terms for accepting peace, they amount to Ukraine's complete capitulation, abandoning NATO aspirations, surrendering all occupied territories, and halting Western military aid. These aren't terms for peace. They're demands for surrender. The Kremlin's mixed messaging reveals Putin's true strategy. While his spokesman Dmitry Peskov publicly claims Russia is open to negotiations, Russian forces continue their relentless advance, reportedly trapping Ukrainian units in the Kursk region. This isn't coincidence, it's strategy. Putin has mastered the art of diplomatic delay as a battlefield tactic. When proposals arrive from Western leaders, his standard response is to request painstaking study, while his military continues seizing territory. Every day spent in diplomatic limbo means more Ukrainian land under Russian control. This approach isn't new. In Chechnya, Georgia, and earlier phases of the Ukraine conflict, Putin has repeatedly used ceasefire talks as opportunities to regroup, resupply, and strengthen his military position. History shows us that when Putin talks peace, he's usually preparing for more war.
As the opposition, we support efforts to resolve this conflict, but we cannot write a blank check. If British peacekeeping troops in Ukraine were attacked, whether directly or via proxies, we could be drawn into conflict with Russia.
The way to ensure we have peace is to ensure there are guarantees for any deal that is in place, because the surest risk that there would be conflict is if Putin thinks that he can breach any deal that may be arrived at.
The objective for his visit to Washington was to get that US security guarantee for Ukraine, and I commend his efforts in this very difficult task. But nonetheless, on Monday, the United States withdrew military aid for Ukraine.
Yes, that's the last thing anybody wants to see, and the whole point of ensuring that there's a lasting peace and that any deal, if there's a deal, is defended.
What emboldens Putin to reject Western proposals is Russia's surprising economic resilience. Despite unprecedented sanctions, Russia's economy grew 3.6% last year, outpacing many Western economies. Oil revenue continues flowing through loopholes, and Moscow has found willing trading partners in China, India, and throughout the global south. Why compromise when your economy is weathering the storm? The fracturing Western response plays perfectly into Putin's hands. Trump speaks of his good vibes with Putin and promises to end the war in 24 hours, while Starmer warns of straining every sinew to pressure Russia. This stark contrast gives Putin exactly what he wants: a divided West unable to maintain a unified front. Putin's master plan becomes clear when we see how he's exploiting the fundamental tension between American and European interests. He's betting that Trump's desire for a quick foreign policy win will clash with European concerns about long-term security architecture. By rejecting peace overtures now, Putin hopes to deepen these transatlantic divisions, potentially securing better terms later while Western resolve crumbles. While Putin banks on Western divisions, Starmer has assembled something truly remarkable, a coalition of 25 nations ready to take unprecedented steps against Russian aggression. This isn't just another diplomatic club with fancy statements and empty promises. It's a genuine coalition of the willing that includes European powerhouses, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, plus key figures from NATO and the EU Commission. What makes this alliance different is their willingness to consider options that would have been unthinkable just months ago. The March 15th virtual summit Starmer convened wasn't just for show. It laid groundwork for military planning meetings scheduled for March 20th, where concrete security guarantees for Ukraine will be hammered out. And here's where things get serious. Starmer explicitly mentioned troops on the ground and planes in the sky as potential components of these guarantees. This isn't some vague diplomatic posturing. It's a fundamental shift in Western strategy. This coalition has devised a three-pronged approach that might finally give Putin pause. First, accelerated military support to Ukraine, not just maintaining current levels, but dramatically increasing them. Second, tightened sanctions that will further isolate Russia's economy. And third, perhaps most significantly, exploring legal mechanisms to seize approximately 200 billion euros in frozen Russian assets. That last point deserves special attention. For 2 years, these assets have been frozen but not confiscated. The legal complexities of outright seizure have deterred Western leaders from taking this step. But Starmer's coalition is actively seeking ways to cut through these legal barriers and weaponize this enormous sum against Putin's war machine. Beyond immediate actions, European nations are fundamentally rethinking their military postures. The UK has committed to raising defense spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, while the Czech Republic is pushing for an even more ambitious 3% target. These aren't minor budgetary adjustments. They represent a continental awakening to the reality that Europe may need to take primary responsibility for its own security. What we're witnessing is a strategic pivot from merely supporting Ukraine to establishing a credible deterrent that would make any eventual peace deal stick. As Starmer himself warned, without proper security guarantees, Putin will breach the line again. This coalition understands that only strength will convince Putin to negotiate honestly. The diplomatic showdown unfolding between Starmer's coalition and Putin now enters its most critical phase. These coming weeks will reveal whether Europe can finally present the united front necessary to bring Russia to genuine negotiations, or if the cracks in Western resolve will once again give Putin the advantage he seeks. Trump's warnings about World War III deserve serious consideration in this context. If Starmer's diplomatic initiative collapses, we're facing a genuinely dangerous scenario. NATO Article 5 looms large here. Any expansion of conflict beyond Ukraine's borders would trigger collective defense obligations, potentially forcing member states into direct confrontation with Russia. What begins as a regional conflict could rapidly escalate into something far more catastrophic. The fundamental question has shifted dramatically. This isn't merely about achieving peace in Ukraine anymore. It's about whether Europe can defend itself if America retreats from its traditional security role. Starmer's coalition represents not just crisis management, but potentially the birth of a new European security approach that might have to stand without American leadership at its core.